Hi, this is Anthony Vanderwood with another Actifio Tech Tip. This week I got asked about Microsoft SQL Server dynamic data masking. Pretty cool function that Microsoft have built into their SQL Server product that lets you obfuscate data without actually changing it in the actual database itself. So very handy for test data management, or particularly for like help desks where you want to present data to people but there's certain fields you just need to partially hide. So let me show you how you would use this with an Actifio virtual database. First up, if you're not familiar with the dynamic data masking, you can Google it. There's a URL here which would be rather hard pressed to write down very quickly, but dynamic data masking is clearly defined here on this rather nicely done Microsoft page. It shows you basically, as I said, that it's obfuscation. We're not changing the data, we're just basically hiding parts of it or all of it. There are a few functions in here. They have this thing called a dynamic data mask, and there's various categories that you can follow. I'll leave you to investigate that part of it, but I want to show you how I can use this with Actifio. So first up, I need to go to GitHub, github.com/Actifio, and look for a repository called Windows Dynamic Masking. Probably badly named, but anyway. In here, there are three files you want: the README, there is a BAT file, and there is a SQL file. Now, the BAT file you will not need to edit. We'll just put this into place. And it will be used by our workflow process. The SQL file, obviously you'll need to change because everyone's going to be different. So what I'll do is I'll actually show you literally an example of how we set it up. First up, we need to build ourselves a workflow. So I'm going to flip over here to AGM, and I've actually created a workflow already for my database called SmallDB, called Dynamic Mask. And what I'm going to do is right-click and edit that workflow. In this example, I've got a direct mount workflow that's on demand. Remember, we could do this with a live clone, but in this case, we don't really need to because we're not changing any data. We're just mounting a virtual copy. I'm going to mount it to my my demo host here, demo SQL 4. It's going to call the BAT file that I showed you in our GitHub repository, dynamicmask.bat, and it's going to supply the name of this SQL file, dynamicmask.sql, to it. So both of those files need to be present, and I'll show you where you need to put them. Only one of them needs to be edited, which is the SQL file, which clearly is going to be unique for every database. And then we need to give our virtual database a name, and that name needs to match the name that's going to be called in the SQL file. So that's all we need to do from that perspective. Now let's head over to a Windows host. So on the Windows host itself, in the that we're going to mount to, and this is not the source, this is the target server, on my C drive in Program Files Actifio, if we've already installed the connector, which we should have done, we'll have a scripts folder. And in the scripts folder is where we drop those two files that you get from GitHub, the BAT file, which we don't need to change, and the SQL file. So the SQL file I will show you, I'll open it up with editpad++ just to show you what it does, which is that it connects to the mask SmallDB database. It goes to alter one table, DBO customer. It sets a mask against one column, which is the last name column. It then creates a local database user, dev login, in the dev login logging connection, and grants select only on one table. So you're going to see all of this as we move through. So once we've done that, we're now ready to kick on to setting up our SQL Server. So the only setup we're going to do here is I'm going to log in using Windows authentication as a fully privileged user and just show you one thing that I did beforehand. This is part of the demo I've set up here. You wouldn't necessarily do it in your environment, but I've set up a login called dev login, and dev login currently has no users attached to it. So it's got no user mapping, it's got no server roles, it's basically a useless login, but we're going to use it as part of this demonstration. And at the moment you can see I've got no databases mapped. So what I'm now going to do is run the workflow and present the database into SQL Server, and I'm going to show you what a fully privileged user can see and then what an unprivileged user can see. All right, so my workflow ran creating a mount job, in this case, not a reprovision because there was no database there in the first place. So it's a mount job mounted to my host, and it ran in just under 3 minutes. So now that we've run the workflow, we're going to go and have a look at the server and check out our virtual database. So the first thing I'm going to do is log in as a fully privileged user, and I'm going to show you the database. So you can see there's a database that wasn't there before, mask SmallDB. It's got two tables, DBO customer and DBO employee. And the other thing, well, if I actually just show you here, DBO customer, if I select the top 1,000 rows of my virtual database, you can see I can clearly see the last name. The other thing I wanted to show you was under security. Remember I showed you that dev login. If I right click and go properties, Before, there were no users mapped to that dev login. Now there's now a user, dev login user, mapped against mask small db. But remember, that user is basically useless. It has almost no capability. So now what I'm going to do is log in as that user. Get rid of that. So I'm going to log in as that user, which means I'm going to use SQL Server authentication. And you're going to see the effect of the dynamic data masking, which is I still see the same database, but I'm only seeing one table. That's because of the SQL script that we ran. But more to the point, when I right click and select the top 1,000 rows, what you'll see is that the last name is now masked. And that's being done by Microsoft. So underline the database is unchanged, but this test copy that I can now present to an unprivileged user will be obfuscated properly according to the policies that we set up in our SQL script. All right, hopefully that was useful too. Thanks for listening.